Theodore. He's a tugboat and a friendly tugboat too. A friendly tugboat too. Oh, Theodore likes to do the things that friendly tugboats do. Pushing and a pulling in the great big harbor, in the great big world is so much fun. So many brand new things to discover. Waking with the sun, gotta get the job done. Oh, Theodore and Emily, Bodak, Hank and George, and the harbor master too.
Alright, so we open up on another beautiful day in the big harbor as Theodore floats over to say good morning to Owen. But while talking to the big rig, Theodore notices how unusually quiet Owen is. That's because he was assigned to work out on the ocean with a new tug. And judging by the reaction, this new tug might not be very pleasing.
His name is Oliver the Vast, said Owen quietly. He's an ocean tug. I don't really like him. No siree, Bob. I know Oliver. It was George. Oh, I met him out on the ocean once. What's he coming here for? To take me out on the ocean to work, replied Owen. Well, when George heard this, he frowned a great big frown. Well, I could take you, Owen, he said. I'm big enough. Is Oliver as big as you are, George? Asked Theodore. I could take Owen, repeated George, not answering Theodore's question. And anyway, Oliver isn't very friendly.
Ah, so the new tug's name is Oliver the Vast. Rather interesting choice for a V-word, but again, given the reactions of both Owen and now George, Oliver doesn't sound like a very pleasant tugboat. What I want to know is, when exactly did these two meet Oliver? Was there an in-between time period we don't know of, or did this happen well before Theodore even came to the harbor? This is just like Molly the Vehement all over again back from Tug of the Year. But anyways, Theodore was doubly sure he'd be friends with Oliver as he was with everyone else in the harbor. That's a nice thought, but it almost never works out that way 100% of the time. With that said, the following day, Theodore was given a special job of moving Shelburne, and on the way he noticed Oliver coming into the harbor.
That must be Oliver, he said. I bet he's a whole smokestack taller than George, gasped Theodore. And then something awful happened. Hey, get out of my way, shouted Oliver. The big tug rumbled right up and bumped Theodore away from Shelburne. That's what I do. Well, at first, Theodore didn't know which felt worse, the hurt or the surprise. Well, why'd you do that? I move big barges like this, snorted Oliver. The big tug took Theodore's special job away from him, right in front of Shelburne and Benjamin Bridge and the Ferry twins and everyone. Then Theodore felt an even worse feeling than before. The feeling that there was nothing he could do about it.
Okay, well, that just happened. Was there any particular reason why you just did that? Just because you usually pull big barges does not mean you can just take away someone else's job. And also, if everyone just now saw this happen, then why didn't they do anything to stop Oliver? That just doesn't fly with me.
Jeez, I can relate so much to this. Once back in my school days, I was once waiting in line at lunch to grab a drink from the cafeteria, but this one ass pushed me out of the line, and I tried to shove him back and get back in the line, but I couldn't, as a couple of his other friends were pushing me out and telling me to get back. So I shoulder barged them and walked on out of there red-faced in anger. So, yeah, being pushed around is not fun.
I'm in agreement, as I have also been pushed around by bullies, IRL and even online at times. And it really does suck. Anyway, the following day, as the tugs were heading off to work, Oliver came up behind Theodore and bumped him again.
Theodore just couldn't believe Oliver had bumped him again. Sure, other tugs had bumped him before, but it was always meant to be fun. This bump really hurt. You gonna cry now? Said Oliver in a laughing voice. Theodore tried to make a brave face. No, he finally managed to say. But in inside he was still shaking. And that's when Oliver backed up and bumped him again, even harder this time. Ow! Theodore couldn't help but cry out loud. He gathered his courage and turned towards the bigger tug. "Don't do that! I don't like it!" Well, Oliver backed up as if he was going to give Theodore another bump.
He said he doesn't like that.
It was George. He'd been watching the whole thing.
Leave my friend alone,
shouted George. Oliver kept on staring straight at Theodore, as if George wasn't even there.
I guess a little tug like you needs other tugs to fight for him,
he said in a voice that made Theodore feel very, very small.
If there's one thing to go about this scene, it's that words are just as hurtful as a bump. You may be hurt on the outside, but the inside is where it truly gets you. And that is a pretty sickening feeling. Was that how it was for you, Matt?
I guess that was the only time I had a physical encounter with a bully. The only bullying I received was more psychological and verbal. So I guess my way of being hurt would be with words, which is why I cannot stand the term, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names can never hurt me." Bullshit, they never. Words can be just as hurtful as a punch or a kick any day.
1000%. So later on that day, as Theodore was heading home, he caught sight of Oliver again. And things got a little more hectic, to say the least.
Theodore turned back towards Oliver and rumbled his engine as if to say, "I'm not afraid of you." But Oliver kept on coming, straight towards him. And that's when Theodore knew that Oliver was going to bump him again. I'll bump him back, thought Theodore, and he got ready. But at the very last moment, Theodore decided to turn and float away. Then Oliver began to chase him. Theodore could almost feel the big tug's bumpers on his back. His engine pounded deep in his hull as he raced away. Now, Theodore is smaller than Oliver, but he's also quick and clever. Theodore hurried under Owen the oil rig to hide. Oliver looked and looked, but couldn't see Theodore anywhere. Theodore turned off his engine and tried not to breathe, tried not to make even the tiniest sound. Until Oliver was gone.
Well, I certainly know how that feels. Being chased by a bully is probably the scariest thing anyone can go through. Believe me, I speak from experience. I'm still as puzzled as everyone else. Why is Oliver the way he is? Was it maybe because he was bullied once? Or did he just decide to take advantage of the fact he's so big that he picks on others? More still, has he done this to anyone else? I've absolutely no idea. Well, now that Oliver disappeared, Theodore was too frightened to come out. And even from way up, even Owen could tell that something was wrong.
What's the matter, Theodore?
He called down. "Oh, nothing," replied Theodore, trying not to sound afraid. "That new tug is just unfriendly."
Yes, he is very unfriendly,
agreed Owen.
You want me to talk to him for you?
"No, I don't need you to," replied Theodore in his biggest voice. "I'm not a little tug." Theodore searched and searched for reasons why Oliver didn't like him. Maybe it is because I'm not big enough, he thought. Theodore had never felt so alone. "I always make friends with everyone."
Damn, did anyone else's heart just break? This particular scene hurts in so many ways. It's probably one of the most relatable and saddest scenes in the whole show. Just seeing and feeling how sad and lonely Theodore feels is heartbreaking. I can see a lot of myself in Theodore's character here, as there were times when I would just hide in my room and cry for hours on end. So I know all too well how he feels. What do you think, Matt?
I can definitely relate to Theodore here. When he told Owen nothing was wrong, as a means of not wanting to drag the issue out further, it would give the bullies more of a reason to target you. Another reason was not really having the mental strength to get other people involved, because then I think the whole situation would be blown out of proportion, which I did not want at the time.
So later that night, after everyone was asleep, Theodore headed home but was startled by a still-awake dispatcher waiting up for him.
Theodore, said the dispatcher, where have you been? I've been waiting up for you. I'm just out, replied Theodore. Well, said the dispatcher, you better get some sleep now. Tomorrow is a busy day. Tomorrow, thought Theodore. The thought of another day hiding from Oliver made him feel sick. Suddenly, Theodore knew what he had to do. Can I ask you something? Yes, Theodore, said the dispatcher. Theodore took a deep breath and told the dispatcher all about Oliver the Bully. First, I tried to make friends, explained Theodore. And then I was going to bump him back, but I guess, I couldn't. I'm very proud of you, Theodore, said the dispatcher in a gentle voice. You are? Said Theodore, surprised. But I didn't do anything. I'm glad you didn't try and deal with this bully by yourself, the dispatcher went on. I think that would have only made things worse. Yes, I guess you're right, agreed Theodore. Now, Theodore, I won't always be able to help you, said the dispatcher with a smile in his voice. But this time, I think I can.
This scene right here is very touching when Theodore finally talks to the dispatcher. The feeling of release and no longer having that feeling of loneliness and knowing that there are people who will support you is the most uplifting thing to experience. It makes me feel so lucky to have such a supporting circle of friends and family by my side, because I'm aware some people don't have that kind of support, which is awful. So it makes me appreciate said support so much more.
This is why I look at the dispatcher as a father-like figure to someone like Theodore. Seeing him commend Theodore for running away instead of bumping Oliver back just shows how much he truly cares. That said, sometimes standing up to a bully is good, but it also depends on how you go about it. One wrong move and the situation could be a lot worse. So I definitely applaud Theodore here. So now that the info was out about Oliver, the dispatcher sent him back home, and all was normal again in the harbor. Only thing left to say is...
Adios, motherfucker.
Early the next morning, the dispatcher sent Oliver, the ocean tug, back home. He gave Theodore another big job, moving Shelburne, the sea barge. And George was given the job to move Owen out to the ocean. Good morning, Owen, said Theodore. Good morning, George.
Good morning, Theodore.
Called George.
See you soon. Yes, sir, Bob.
Boomed Owen. Theodore just loved saying good morning to everyone in the big harbor. It was such a warm, wonderful feeling. A feeling like everyone on the whole ocean was his friend.
And that concludes Theodore and the Bully. Alright, Matt, what are your thoughts?
It is genuinely one of the greatest storytellings of the point of view from a bully victim. What is covered in this episode is almost every aspect of what someone could go through if they were to be bullied, be it at school, work, or even at home. So many people could relate to this story in many capacities, and even delivers a great moral of no matter where you go, there's always going to be that one sad person who doesn't have anything better to do than to be an ass. It also shows you to not be afraid to tell someone that's trustworthy for some help, and is saying that it's okay if you can't fight back, because that's what makes you the better person, and I absolutely love it for that. So to top it all off, phenomenal episode. One of my all-time favourite of the entire series, for sure.
It's certainly no secret that an episode with such a heavy topic would be so relatable in today's society. Bullying, obviously, is never a good thing to go through. No one should ever have to be put in a situation as bad as this, and I know this from my own personal experiences. We usually see kids shows that cover a bully-type story, and they all mostly have the same plotline. The bigger antagonist picks on the smaller protagonist. But there's also one other important key thing added here. That being, while you may make a lot of friends in life, that doesn't always mean everyone in the world will like you. There will be times where you run into someone that just doesn't like you for whatever the reason, and will make your life miserable. It's a very sad but painfully honest truth, which poor Theodore had to find out the hard way. Speaking of, viewers are introduced to our one-off new character, Oliver, who pretty much is a... I would have actually liked to know a little bit more of his backstory. Like, what harbor does he come from? How'd he get his V-word? Or did something happen to him prior for him to become a bully? These, unfortunately, are questions we will never know. Music, as always, was pretty standard. I will say, though, Graham Shaw did an amazing job capturing the emotionally tender and sad scenes. Probably some of his best tracks we've heard in the whole show. And for visuals, we get multiple angle shots all around the harbor, such as the cargo docks, underneath Owen, and the Great Ocean Dock. So overall, this episode is fantastic. Hands down, one of the best written, and my overall favorite of the whole show. Next episode is George and the Underwater Mystery.